Good morning. We start a new sermon series today, our hymn of praise, the 3 weeks leading up to Thanksgiving. And our scripture for today is Psalm 100. I know that it various traditions in different churches and everything growing up that some of the Psalms were memorized. And I remember memorizing Psalm 23. But not Psalm 100 that we're using today. But I know a lot of people did memorize Psalm 100. Did any of you encourage? Uh, One of several Psalms, Psalm 90 through 106 are in a section of Psalms that focus on praise. And theme that runs through them, and it is also spelled out literally of his faithfulness continues. Some of the Psalms have those words in there that way, but that is a theme that runs through this. Psalm 100, sometimes referred to as Old 100. There's a road over in the outskirts of Richmond that the name of the road is Old 100. And I don't know whether it has any connection to this psalm or not, but every time I go through that way, if you're going in Route 60 through Midlothian, you'll pass it going in that way. But every time I go in that way and I see that sign, Old 100, Route Old 100, I wonder if it has any connection to Psalm 100 since people refer to it that way. I don't know, probably not, but it makes me think of that. The psalm itself was probably written, it's unknown exactly when or who, but the consensus seems to center around that it was written with the rebuilding and rededication of the temple after Nebuchadnezzar destroyed Jerusalem. So some of the people are starting to return. This would correlate to Nehemiah and Ezra, books of Nehemiah and Ezra in the Bible, and that when the temple was once again available for worship, that people would come to that. So let's hear the words of the psalm. Shout triumphantly to the Lord, all the earth. Serve the Lord with celebration. Come before him with shouts of joy. Know that the Lord is God. He made us. We belong to him. We are his people, the sheep of his own pasture. Enter his gates with thanks. Enter his courtyards with praise. Thank him. Bless his name. Because the Lord is good, his loyal love lasts forever. His faithfulness lasts generation after generation. There is a praise chorus that comes directly out of this psalm. Enter his gates with thanksgiving.
I will enter his gates with thanksgiving in my heart. I will enter his courts with praise.
There are some other hymns and that come from this. There is one in our hymnal, and I should have written it down and I didn't. That takes this Psalm 100 as its text. The commentary that I found on this psalm references it to a protocol of and for worship. And when I saw that word protocol, it made me think of a sermon that one of our retired bishops, Bishop Woody White, preached years ago at Junaluska. And in that sermon, he talked about a lesson that he learned from his grandmother, that there was a difference between going to church and having church. And what he learned from his grandmother was that as you prepared yourself to worship, then you had church, as opposed to just getting up on Sunday morning, getting dressed and going to church and expecting something to happen. You went having prepared yourself by prayer and scripture, and you expected something to happen. And you knew, you not only expected it, but you knew something was going to happen. A couple weeks ago, I filled in for one of our pastors. His wife had died, and I told those people after worship that I was blessed to be in the company of people that came to have church, not just came to come to church. And another thought that I had along that line is that as I prepared to start serving as a pastor, I pestered a lot of pastors with this question, and none of them ever answered me. They just said, never thought about that, or it's not an issue. But the question was, when I start to lead worship as opposed to being a member of the congregation, how do you go about making sure that your need to worship is met? And what I found, what I discovered, is the wisdom of Bishop White that learned from his grandmother, is that I was spending more time preparing for worship than I had ever done before. And so I was having church and organizing the order of worship, and selecting the hymns, praying over the scripture, dealing with the scripture during the week. That all of that prepared me to have church in a way that I never had it before. But in this protocol, there are 7 things that stand out in it. It starts with raise your voice. The first verse, shout triumphantly to the Lord, all the earth, with joy. It's not just shouting for shouting's sake, but that there is joy in that. Render honor to God. Know that the Lord is God. He made us. We belong to Him. We are His people, the sheep of His own pasture. Draw near to God with singing. Come before Him with shouts of joy. Acknowledge God. That same verse, that drawing near and acknowledging are all contained there. Open the door. In other words, don't just go expecting, but open the door as an action that you're doing something about your worship and giving thanks. Enter His gates with thanks. The older translations actually add thanksgiving to that in that word.
What is the matter with older translations? What makes this one any easier to understand than I will enter His gates with thanksgiving in my heart, I will enter His courts with praise? What's hard to understand about that?
Not anything. It's just that the way that it was done for Common English, that they make some changes there that make it easier to read.
I think I need a Bible that has all the parts I basically know in my head to be the
You need the parallel Bible, it's got 4
No,
translations.
she needs to, what she's saying is the verses like this one that she knows from
Hard.
heart, that it needs to be in those words.
Leave them alone.
Yeah.
The 23rd Psalm is the 23rd Psalm, don't change it.
I like
King
that.
James.
Don't fix what ain't broke.
You have a lot of company in that thought.
I'm one of them too.
I'm old now, you know.
Yeah, don't mess with the 23rd Psalm, the rest you can.
Bless the name of God. In the Common English, it says that quite clearly. Bless His name. So there's an order there that is spelled out. I mean, the psalm just flows through that. These psalms, the book of Psalms in general, I meant to say this at the beginning, that the psalms were used by the Israelite people as their hymn book. They literally sang these psalms during their worship. They sang some of them on their way to worship, on their way home from worship. And one of the ways that they used them, Roger, I know that you were in the military. Did Jim?
Cadence.
Ed, did you ever?
I have not.
Okay. Well, your cadence,
Cadence.
right? The
Marching with
leader
cadence.
of the group would call out, and there were words that were used, songs that were made up to help you keep in step. And it was a call and response.
And it's also to help keep you from feeling tired. It kept you doing, and it would uplift your spirits, and you'd keep up the pace, and you wouldn't slow down. You had a set pace, so many steps per minute or whatever, and that cadence kept you in step and kept you going, and you didn't slack behind.
Well, the way that we did the Lord's Prayer a couple weeks ago, that kind of call and response, was a way that it was used by the people as they were traveling, also in worship. They didn't have a book that they could open up to the right page and see the words in front of them. There would be a song leader who would sing out the words, and the people would sing them back to him. And that's the way that they sang them. We had a pastor in the Virginia conference. He, in his retirement, Stan Garrett, his wife Susan Garrett was one of our district superintendents prior to her retirement. But Stan, in his retirement, went back to a monastery outside of Winchester, Virginia. He had served a church in Winchester and gotten to know the fathers in the brothers in the monastery, and they had a provision where you could come and spend a night. Well, he wanted to do something more than that, and they made accommodation for him. He wanted to go and spend one night or one day and night for each year that he served in ministry. And he wanted to do that as a way of reflecting back on the ministry that he had had. He said he took list from congregations, membership rolls with him. But one of the things that he said that was unexpected to him, that kind of snuck up on him, was a part of the practice in that order was to sing the Psalms in their worship. And he said in the 31 days that he was there for his 31 years of ministry, that they went through the book of Psalms, I think if I remember correctly, he said 3 times. Because there was multiple times during the day that they would sing the Psalms. And he said the Psalms came alive in a way that they never had before in that immersion into them. And one of the things, and I've discovered this too, and had discovered it before I heard him say this, is that you will find every human emotion that is available to us as human beings. You will find every one of those emotions expressed here in the Psalms in some shape or form. From anger, despair, to the joy that this psalm reflects in it. And there is the image of the shepherd, the sheep of his, we are his people, the sheep of his own pasture. In other words, that God is a shepherd there, harking back to the 23rd Psalm, the Lord is my shepherd. And one final thought here is that it is all people. Shout triumphantly to the Lord, all the earth. Not just the Hebrew people, but all the people that this is addressed to. And just another reflection, and you find it, when you look for it, you find this all through Scripture, all through the Old Testament, even when the Hebrew people are being held up as God's chosen people, you still find all of those references that God desires and wants that relationship with all creation, not just the Hebrew people. The Hebrew people were chosen and set aside as a way of spreading the message. And somewhere along the line, they cut the line on that and decided that that wasn't what they needed to do.
Can I interject a thought?
Absolutely.
People were let me start again. Praise was and create and God's relationship, here we go. God's relationship with his people isn't the only thing. God also wanted to be in relationship with his world, with his land.
Right.
And his storms and all that stuff. And I think the reason that we have what we have now in the natural world is because we blew it.
We've corrupted God's perfect creation.
Right. And we continue to.
That's because man thinks he can do it better than God did.
Well, or else
Trying to improve on what's already perfect.
people don't believe in God at all.
But these psalms of praise are some of my favorite parts of the book of Psalms. There's another psalm, the very last psalm, that really fits into this, Psalm 150, that also calls forth for that expression of praise and thanksgiving. And when we incorporate that into our worship, it takes our worship into a better place. When we can have that joy and praise and a little bit of noise. Worship, as it's laid out here, is not a quiet, somber expression. I remember reading in a short story, it might have been in the what's that, Guidepost or Reader's Digest, but that a pastor, his father was also a pastor. His father came to visit, and as they were worshiping, his father interrupted him and started addressing the people and told his son to sit down because he needed to hear it too. And what he was saying to him was, you all are acting like you're dead. Quiet here. A workshop on evangelism that I attended, the leader of it said that unless the police had been called to the church because you were making too much noise, you weren't doing something right. Well, we'll see where Pastor Don goes with this. Next week, we look at Philippians. And I think I meant to look at this before I got here, but I think what we're dealing with is probably one of the first Christian hymns that was incorporated in worship, in Christian worship. So may God's blessings be upon you, and hope you'll join us later on at worship.